Welcome, everyone, to the closing session of Diversity in the Minerals, Metals, and Materials Professions, DMMM1. I'm delighted that you've all stayed through to hear, to wrap things up. I think it's going to be a wonderful morning for bringing everything together so that you can go home to your home institutions inspired and invigorated and with new ideas and new tools at your disposal. We're going to begin this morning with our closing plenary lecture from Professor Mildred Dresselhaus of MIT. Dr. Dresselhaus began her career in 1960 as a member of the research staff at the MIT Lincoln Lab, and after earning her PhD at the University of Chicago and a 2-year postdoc at Cornell. Her research led to her appointment as an MIT faculty member and eventually as a professor in the departments of physics and electrical engineering. Among her other credentials, Dr. Dresselhaus has served as the director of the Office of Science at the U.S. Department of Energy, which she wouldn't remember, but I, as a BES-PI, would remember meeting her in that context. She has received 31 honorary doctorates worldwide. She has accepted the National Medal of Science, the Nicholson Medal for Humanitarian Service, the Compton Award, the Fermi Prize, and the Cavell Prize, all the highest honors that science has to offer, and has co-authored more than 1,600 publications, including books, book chapters, invited review articles, and, of course, peer-reviewed journal articles. And I found this fact on the internet, and I hope it is correct, Dr. Dresselhaus. She was PI on the first NSF grant on the status of women in science in about 1973, according to the internet. So we'll hope it's correct. Please join me. We are honored to welcome Dr. Mildred Dresselhaus. Would you prefer to use the mic, or we have the clip-on kind?
I can do the mic.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. I'm used to speaking in this auditorium, but we don't have too many people compared to the usual. So we need more women in science, I guess, and more people that haven't participated before. I'll start with my take-home message. I think most of us are drawn to science because we love it, and this is what we wake up in the morning thinking about and look forward to a great day ahead of us. And, well, I started out that way in my youth, and I'm still here, and I have the same opinion about it. There are very few things, walks of life, professions, etc., that have the same level of satisfaction as a career in science and discovery. And because of that, it seems to me that we should be educating our young people that the best thing that you can possibly do is to combine enjoyment with your life's work. So many people find going to work drudgery, and they do it because they have to support themselves and their families. But to actually enjoy every minute of it, or pretty much every minute of it, is unusual. So anyhow, that is a take-home message. So everybody at this conference, it seems to me, was telling something about how they got there. And so I decided, well, I better do some of that too. So I will say something about myself. There was an introduction, but it didn't really give the improbableness of my being here very clearly. So I think I'm going to emphasize that and say that anybody can do this if they put their mind to it and want to do it. And another message is probably could only happen on this hemisphere. And there aren't many places in the world that you could start anywhere and wind up any place else. So most places, your origin predetermines part of what happens later to a greater degree than it does in the U.S. And I hope that time will be such that we'll be able to maintain this kind of mobile possibility, career possibility for everybody, depending on ability, ambition, and desire. So that is kind of a take-home message, and I hope that the diversity, or whatever you want to call diversity, availability is maybe another way to say it, remains with us for a very long time to come. And what's happening in the education revolution that's now occurring preserves that and in fact promotes it further. So, a little bit about myself. My formal career, I guess, starts in 1960. That's my independent career. But whereas many people in this room are talking about all the hardships they had in their career, my hardships were all finished by the time I started high school. So, and everything has been downhill from there, easy sailing. So, so let me go through that a bit and say how important it is for society to maintain career paths so that one can do things that seem unattainable at birth. So I was born on the wrong side of the railroad tracks, as you could say, in New York City. New York City is a great place to be born, actually. It has the very best schools, the best opportunities that you can find most any place. But it also has the opposite. And if you happen to wind up on the wrong side of the tracks, sometimes it's hard to cross the tracks, trains coming, and you have to get out of the way. But my early schooling was at the very worst schools where you learn almost nothing, and if you didn't teach yourself, you weren't going to learn very much either. Nowadays, of course, there's the internet, and if the youngsters growing up on the wrong side of the track maybe have access to internet, it might be easier to make the transition. But I don't really know if that's happening, and maybe people here are investigating that sort of thing because that's important. But my start came through music, and at a young age, I happened to have a brother who was 3 years older than me, who was a child prodigy. He also grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, but his talents were recognized because he had an unusual intellect. So I was the younger sister and went along on his bootstraps or something, whatever you call it, and the teachers that taught him wanted to find out if his younger sister had some talent also. So they gave me a chance. And so by my musical memory, I could sing everything that he played on the violin. So that was my plus. That's how I got started, because the teachers thought that I had talent too, so they gave me a chance. And so I got free violin lessons. And it wasn't so much the violin lessons, although they were important because I'm still playing, so that hasn't stopped. But the important thing was it gave me a route for self-education. So I got the scholarship when I was a kid, before I started school. And what I saw as a 5, 6-year-old child was that there were people that actually had an opportunity to attend good schools, which I didn't have. But I could see what they were learning, and it was available. And in New York City, it was very interesting. One could write away for all kind of examinations and that were given publicly. And so I had access to the examinations. I didn't have access to anything else but the final result, which is the examinations, not the answers to the questions, but the questions. So try to figure out how to do the questions yourself. And so self-study is what I learned. Very important. I don't know how well kids learn self-education, but it's more important to learn how to study and how to teach yourself than sometimes the actual facts. But I managed to do both. And so I'm a big advocate of self-study. And nowadays, with the internet, it's greatly simplified. And not only simplified, but it's greatly enforced or encouraged, because people know that if you don't do something yourself, you're not going to get very far. So as a youngster, I had that. Another thing that was really good that happened to me that maybe other people would think was bad was I had assumed home responsibilities. My mother took a 12-hour job, and she was gone for she left 6 p.m. just before dinner. My job was to prepare dinner and serve family. I was the only girl, so that was my job. And that turned out to be useful, because learning how to do things for yourself, self-reliance is important. So home responsibility, good. Musical education, good. Self-study, good. All of these things that I had as a child were good and important. So, as I said, I went to very poor schools, so I had self-study was the way I got ahead. The biggest struggle I had was to get into a good school that was publicly offered, because of course I had no money. So there was one school for girls in New York City that was a special school, Hunter High, and they admitted, I think it was something like 80 students per year, and so that was my job to get in there. And so that was my self-study task. I would say that was my biggest obstacle in my career. So that was childhood, almost. 9th grade is when that happened. And once I got into good high school, it was all downhill from there on in. So because I was normalized, I was with the other people, and I was once I caught up with them on all the other subjects that weren't tested in the entrance exam, I was just fine. So, okay, so that's kind of my struggle in academics. So from there on, I went to Hunter High and then Hunter College to become a school teacher, because that was the only thing I knew. But Hunter College at that time, that was right, 1940s, that time was a place that women were, because they had difficulty getting jobs in other places. And my first physics teacher was Rosalind Yellow, who you might No got the Nobel Prize, but she was teaching at Hunter College because she couldn't get a job. And so we met each other and became lifelong friends at that time. She was a very inspiring teacher. She taught for 1 semester, and then she got a job at the Veterans Administration. Veterans Administration was not a place where they had science, but they got Rosalind Yellow, and she brought science there and started a science program, and kind of the rest is history, because then they had a science program, it stayed there, it still is there. And she was initial leader of it. So that's a little bit of background. So I'm at Hunter College to become a school teacher, meet Rosalind Yellow. She says, study science. Don't care what you do, study something. Don't just stop at being a school teacher. So I learned a little chemistry and math and whatever was there to offer. And then I saw a notice on a bulletin board about the Fulbright program. I didn't know anything about the Fulbright program, but nobody else did either because it was the first year of it. But I applied and I was accepted. So that's how I got to Cambridge University in the UK. So what I learned about there was about many things, and I had a broad exposure to what Cambridge University offered. Cambridge University is an unusual university, and I've been back a number of times there, and it doesn't change. It's pretty much the way it was when I was there in the 1950s, surprisingly. And probably if I were to go back 100 years from now, it'd still be similar. But it's hard to tell, predict the future like that. But what I learned there was that education learning is very broad. It's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and you find your place and just go with it. Anybody can do anything, and there are no rules. So that was a very nice experience. So I came back to the U.S. After time in the UK. Much, I would say, with a different viewpoint, much broader viewpoint of learning and what people can do in careers. So, but I didn't really get into physics until my next phase, which was going to the University of Chicago. So it was at that point that I got introduced to physics, learned physics, and when I finished, I actually knew something and could do something. So the University of Chicago was a really unusual university. It was still a place that had no particular requirements except publications. So there was no thesis requirement for a PhD, believe it or not, but published papers in the journals was a requirement. This changed. Now it's a regular university, and they do have thesis requirements, but they didn't really have that at my time. And so that's how I got into publication and the importance of publication and letting the world know what you've done. And they may read your work or they may not, but getting it published was an important thing. What I learned from publications, it was announced that I have many publications, which is true. There are even some important publications. When you write an important paper, you might think that something is important. The papers that turn out to be important are the ones that are not understood for at least 10 years or not appreciated. And it's been my experience every time like that. So the tenure process is very peculiar then, because tenure process depends on having some accomplishment and papers that people care about. Well, the papers of mine that people care about today are not the ones that they cared about when they were published. So what's wrong with the system? That's a good question. So when you write a paper that is a field-changing event, where you're doing something that is so novel that the referees don't really see what it's for, and the impact is not felt for 10 years or so. It's important to have some papers like that for the world, but you never know when it's going to hit and which ones are important. That's been my experience. I've had a few like that. And the most important ones are the ones that are least appreciated at the time of publication. So I don't know what that means, but I put this forward as, something for the topic at hand. So I guess that what I should do is show some of the view graphs that I prepared. So let me get at that. Let's see, if I do this, probably will do something. So this should be next. It's not doing next. Let me try this. Okay, now I'm doing the right thing. Let me go back and start at the beginning. Okay. I have some statistics because numbers give a message. So when I started in the physics field, women were getting 2% of PhDs. So what that means is that women were almost sure to be isolated. Class is usually 20 people, 25 people. If women are 2%, they're not going to see another one in the class, right? That's not too likely, or not very many in the class. Class has to be very big. Classes were not so big at that time. So you're in a lonely position, and when you ask a question, everybody in the classroom knows that it's you because your voice is different. So it is not a comfortable position to be. But we live there. So I have some statistics to show that in my own field, women in physics, full professors, so 1998, that's not so long ago, it's 15 years ago, only 3%, not very, very many, right? And so you go to the present, that number is probably like 10. See, this is my data from American Institute of Physics, ends in 2010, but that's what sort of an extrapolation. So the number of students, women students, at my time, when I started my year, 2%. PhD women. Now it's 20%. So that's, a whole order of magnitude change. So that's a very big difference. And at 50%, I don't think that's going to happen in lifetime of the people in the audience, but it'll be higher than it is now. So. But we don't go in for the numbers. We go in for the material, the excitement of doing it, and the enjoy of getting every day to an exciting and interesting career. So a few more numbers. You'll see that at the PhD granting institutions, the increase has been steady, and the largest percentage increase occurs in that quadrant. but the numbers are still on the low side. When you look at the new hires, you see that women are doing better in the new hires than in the traditional. So the youngsters, there are more youngsters and they have a higher probability of being hired. So that's the message here. So go for it, because you have really pretty good chance now, better chance than ever before, and the work is exciting. So this gives a nice picture, and it shows that the hiring generally is down, but the hiring for women is almost constant. And it's limited by the availability. That's the biggest limitation. I think there were more women out there, the numbers would be higher than what you see here, because they are in demand, and I know that we interview quite a large percentage compared to the availability. So that's an interesting statistic. Okay, so, and I'm almost finished with these view graphs. So this shows a summary, and it has blue Afro-American, and you see that from 2008 to 2012, the number was this absolute number was the same, and that has to do with availability. There aren't that many people in the pipeline, so they can't increase the number. For Hispanics, there's a small increase in the number because there are more available. There's still available people that hasn't saturated the market. What you see here, when I would show percentage, is that the majority, other is the majority of what we have now, and that's white women, because this is women faculty we're talking about. What replaces the number that's going down, the percentage going down in the white women, are Asian women. So anyway, we see Asians succeeding and doing well in the field. So a few more specific, this is departments with some women. PhD granting departments now, almost all of them, 91%, so that almost all of them have some women faculty, one or more. One is uncomfortable to be the only one, but anyways, they have some. And however, this one shows that there are some departments, and so this is now 15% have none in 2006, but half of them of that number have none now. So that number is getting smaller and smaller every year, and that's good. But the availability of women faculty is one of the limiting factors now. So that means that there are opportunities out there. That's the way I see it. So again, you see that the Afro-American contingent here, it's about constant, and that has to do with availability of people, that they just don't have more of them to come on the market with limited entry point. The Asians are increasing, and at the expense of the majority, which is the white females. Okay, that's what you see on this view graph. Hispanics are holding their own, increasing very slightly. And you could see that the changes are taking place most on the PhD granting universities. And so that's where the growth is the greatest. And there are more of them too, 192. The bachelor-only schools, they change their faculty slowly. So there aren't many openings coming every year. That's, I think, what the problem is there. And so when you do all the numbers together, you see Afro-American is about a constant number over almost a 10-year period. and that has to do with availability of supply. The Hispanics are increasing slowly, not so much, but increasing. And the total number of women is somewhat limited by, as you could see here. So this is my summary view graph on this topic. So diversity is improving, more diverse with time, but it's happening slowly. Over a 50-year period, when I've been watching this, it started at a very low level, but it's still not a very high number, even after all these years. And part of the reason that it hasn't increased in my field is availability of people. So the opportunities, I think, are there, and the excitement of the field is there. And one advantage of going into a quantitative field like what I'm in is you can evaluate what people are doing. It doesn't matter what they look like so much as what they produce. So that's a big advantage for women, big advantage for minority people. So I would say that being in quantitative fields where people could evaluate your work objectively is a good thing. And I would like to see a little bit more movement in these fields, and my bottom line is the last bullet on this. More encouragement about career opportunities is needed, and that's the big point I'm trying to make in my talk, is that this is a wonderful career to be in. I've been doing it for years. I'm still excited about it. I don't work for money. I work for love. And many people I know are like that. And there aren't too many things that you can do that have those parameters. So what I'd like to say then, in wrapping up my talk, is I'm very happy with what I've done with myself. My family is I have a husband and 4 children and 5 grandchildren, and many of us, most of us, are technical, even going down to the grandchildren generation, and I think that I don't force anybody to do anything, but they do it for their own interest, and they agree. The people that have gone the technical route, which is almost all of them, think that this is really the way to go, and they spend some time proselytizing at their own levels with their own cohorts about the value of a technical career. So I have a few take-home messages I wrote myself here. The first one I'd like to say, it's important what you do in life and not what you look like. And I emphasize that. And I also emphasize that being in fields where you can be evaluated objectively, like maybe physics or engineering, there are actual things that you can look at to evaluate the work, is good for us. And it's important to love your work and look forward to each day, because that's something that very few people in the world have, and in our fields you can have exactly that. I think it's important to have a stable home life, so when you come home and everything is nice and you're happy, and not too many people have that either. So this is a good goal in life. Then a career like the one I've had, where I've actually worked in academia, spent a lot of time working with people from industry who come for interaction and collaborations with me. So a large number of publications is not because I'm so anxious to send papers off to journals, but I have many visiting students and many people coming to work with me, and they are interested in getting their work published, and I help them do that. So, but it's not because I'm interested in having more publications. I've worked in government. If you do well in academia, you get invited to be on all kinds of government committees. And I've been a member of the Academy for 40 years, and this is my 40th year that we're in, just past my 40th birthday of election. So anniversary, I guess you call it. And the Academy has helped me get into government. They put me on committees because they need women on various committees, so I get asked, and sometimes they're interesting for me, so I say, yeah, I'll do that. And that leads to having some influence and getting to know people that have government employment. And I've served in the Clinton administration, so I had some of that of my own. And serving the nation is a noble thing to do. I liked doing that, but it's not for everybody. There are sacrifices. You have to live in Washington for the period that you do that, and subject to government regulations and whatnot. Take a big cut in your salary to come and work in Washington, but it's something that one should do, and I'm glad I did it. And so I think that I've said enough, and it's a good time to quit. I don't see a clock here, so I don't know exactly what time it is, but I imagine I still have 10, 15 minutes or so, or somebody will tell me, for some questions and answers. So happy to take them.
We do have time for questions.
Yeah.
And so the mics, as you'll recall.
Yeah, open mics.
In the center.
Let's have some young people come. Well, there's somebody.
Linda Shadler at RPI.
Yeah, well, we know each other.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you well.
So
Yeah.
you said that after college, or really after high school, it was all smooth sailing.
Yeah.
But I can't believe it was all easy, even though it might have been smooth sailing. So I guess my question, though, would be about, you had 4 children.
Yes.
And you were teaching at RPI.
No, I was never
At MIT, sorry.
Yeah.
Wish it was RPI.
Well, I've been on the board for at RPI a long time. I think that goes back to the 1960s. You had a wonderful president of RPI at that time, and I'm trying to remember his name, but he was a pace setter.
He was, and he used to ask the women every year for a wish, and he changed the institution, granting them wishes that changed the culture. But, 4 children at a time when women working was not necessarily very common. How did you handle that? How did you deal with daycare and raising 4 stable children in a world that was not as accepting of that?
Okay, that's a good question. I think that my technical background, engineering background more than anything else, helped a great deal with that. So I had a system. Everything you do, you need a system, right? And so you have a general rule, but no requirements, because raising children, you have to be flexible. But you have sort of goals, right? So I worked, I went in the morning, and I came back. And when I was gone, we had a babysitter who replaced me. And I had the same woman for 29 years. And she was wonderful. And she had no training to get a different kind of job. So she had she was 10 years older than me, so she was still in good shape at the time that she was the babysitter, official babysitter. And when I was gone, she did the things I would have done had I been home. And that was her purview. And so that worked out very well. And the children loved her, and they said that they had two mothers. They always said that. That was them, not me, saying it. So it worked. She was a very loving person, and had the same rules, no difference in rules. So they saw a constant background, and she was very good. They had activities, and they did their normal things, and she enforced that. My children were very busy when they were growing up. We had a lot of activities for them that they were self-generating, but they played, but they were busy. Didn't get into trouble, in other words. Yeah, important. Yes.
Carol Handwerker, Purdue University. As an undergraduate at MIT, undergraduate, master's student, PhD, Millie, you were the role model. Hard as diamonds, tough as nails. And one of the first stories I ever heard, which I actually checked with you a few years ago whether it was true, was that you were having one of your children and you were working at Lincoln Labs, and that morning, or Friday morning, you were, there at the lab, and Friday evening you played with your musical group, and then Monday morning you were standing around with the guys, and finally you asked them, "Don't you notice anything? I had my baby over the weekend." Okay. So
Yes. That is true.
So
I don't remember which number that was, but
yeah.
but that was the way it was. I'll just explain why that was that way. I had a boss that thought after one child, 2 children maybe, that was it. That was enough. And why 3 and 4? So those were on me. So, okay, so I wasn't really given consideration that it took time to have babies. So they were sort of weekend activities. Yeah.
So that was my observation as well.
That is correct.
And that, I came back to work at least for one day just to show that I could be like Millie. I came back and finished a paper with a 4-day-old baby. So
Congratulations.
Well,
wasn't easy.
This was at NIST.
Yeah.
When I was working with John Kahn. That you know.
Oh, yes, I know John Kahn.
And he had the image that my husband and me were both postdocs, so that we could just bring the baby crib into our office. We would share an office, and we would just take care of the baby there. But that was a little too much. But the thing that the reason why I brought this up is that you are exceptional, and I think everybody can. You're saying everybody can be exceptional if they put their mind to it. But they're different choices. Do you see different pathways? Do we always have to go back to work? And I relished it. It was sort of macho kind of, matcha kind of thing. But what choices do you think we have now?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. Thank you for asking it. We have choices, very wide choices. So I think that the path I took is one limit. It is not the right limit, probably, for hardly anybody, but it was imposed on me. I didn't have a whole lot of choice when I was doing this. So I showed that it could be done. I showed it to myself too. But it's maybe not the thing I would have liked to do if I had my choice. And I'm not an advocate of this choice for anybody, but it shows you can do it if you have to. So if you're doing your thesis and you have to finish your thesis, okay, maybe that's the choice you make. But otherwise, just do what's best for you and comfortable. Combining family and career is something that every family has to work out themselves, with themselves, and also with the employer. So that's sort of my, there's no right way, there's no wrong way. And how many children you have, I think that we've proven that with different examples. So I had 4 and some other people had 5 or 6, and they're doing well too, so in many ways.
Okay, Teresa Pollock, Santa Barbara. Millie, I was very interested in your comment about the publications not becoming important for 10 years and the mismatch with the current system that we have for promoting people. I should thank Carnegie Mellon. I had a 9-year tenure track, so I never really had to worry about publishing papers quickly, and it was great. But I was wondering what advice you might have. There's a lot of assistant professors and maybe aspiring professors. What advice you have for them in terms of their scholarship in the early years of their career?
I'm very glad you asked that question. The number of publications is irrelevant. What counts is, another thing that maybe is more relevant is the impact, and that it can't be measured in the tenure cycle, which is too short. I mean, people make a decision within 10 years, whether it's 6 or 10. It's a short period of time compared to impact factor. If you look at the impact of papers, how often they're read or something like that, the important ones take a while to catch on. So you can't wait for that. So what's necessary in making tenure decisions is having a committee of some sort, a number of people who actually read your papers and try to understand them, as best they can, and discuss the content of the papers. So that's what a tenure committee is about. But my experience is that happens less than half the time, that the people that are making the decision really know the content of the contribution, as best they can from reading the papers.
So the advice would be to inform letter writers,
Well, in a tenure case, usually the candidate says something about what they think is important in their work. They write a statement of accomplishment. That gives you quite a good clue about what the person at least understands about their own work. And then you read the paper and see what you understand about it. But there has to be a discussion of the content of the work. And I've been on many committees, and that is not as well discussed as it should be in many cases. I don't know how. I mean, we could just have some other people comment on that point, because I imagine that many people in this audience have been on tenure committees, so they know what their experience has been. It's improving with time, I'd say.
That would be a good discussion to have, but probably one we don't have time for. I see one more question asker we can address before our break.
Okay, well, let's have the question.
Hi, I'm Winnie from Santa Barbara, And
Speak louder.
I'm Winnie from Santa Barbara, and I think it's fascinating to hear the stories from the older generation and the kinds of struggles that they encountered throughout their lives. But one thing that I heard kind of speckled throughout this conference is kind of the frustration with how slowly diversity has advanced and how we kind of look to the younger generation for progress for the coming future. But one thing that I was wondering is how you think kind of the spectrum of generations in the scientific and technological fields can work together, not only to incorporate people currently in the sciences, but also people who could potentially join, especially like the children, how they could work together to accelerate and advance diversity for the next 20 years or something like that.
Okay. Let me take the beginning part of your comments and question. So I believe that what you said is, let's look at what's happening now. I would say science is executed now differently than it was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, the individual played a larger isolated role than today. Research has become more complicated in that collaborations are much more important now than they were 50 years ago in my early career. And why is that? It's because, first of all, science is moving ahead more rapidly, because research involves the interaction between different disciplines and people with different expertise. So there's more collaborations going on today to make progress. People work in centers rather than in isolated individual groups, much more than they used to. So the way research is done is different. That's the first thing. And the way research is evaluated is different. Publication is much easier now. We have all kind of facilitators like computers and the World Wide Web and everything else. So everything is moving at a different pace. Is that benefit or a handicap for women? Benefits and pluses and minuses, I think, comes out about equal, right? The increasing pace is not so good for women, I think, because we need more time sometimes to put line up our ducks together, and so I think that that part is more difficult. The pace is more changing pace. That there are more opportunities and more excitement, that's good. So we win on some and lose on others. So I imagine it's about the same. It evens out. I don't know that it's changed, but there are more of us than that. I think that's the big plus, and people get more used to us, and we're less of a perturbation to the system. But anyhow, so I'd like to have the opportunity to say that I hope I've been encouraging for careers in science for two reasons. The first is the opportunities are really great, and so we should take advantage of the opportunities. The second thing is being in fields where people can be evaluated objectively, because there are quantitative aspects to it, is good for us, and we should take advantage of that too. So I can see a number of very good things that have happened in recent years, and I think we should take advantage of the opportunities and try to work and solve some of the difficulties.